They laughed the moment the quiet woman in the gray hoodie stepped onto the firing line. But less than an hour later, the best shooter in the building would be staring at her target in complete silence, realizing he had just humiliated someone far beyond his level. The sharp crack of gunfire echoed through Iron Creek Tactical Range as spent brass shells scattered across the polished concrete floor under the fluorescent lights. The air smelled faintly of gun oil, metal, and burnt powder, the familiar scent of competition and ego mixing together in a place where confidence was often louder than skill. Ethan Cole stood at the center of it all, like a king in his domain. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a fitted black tactical jacket with sponsor logos stitched along the sleeves, he held his customized pistol with theatrical precision while a group of students watched in admiration behind the safety line. At 39, Ethan had built a reputation across the state shooting circuit for his speed, accuracy, and even more for his arrogance. He enjoyed being the best shooter in every room he entered, but even more than that, he enjoyed making sure everyone else knew it. The steel target 20 yards away swung slightly as Ethan lowered his weapon and smirked at the clean grouping near center mass. A few students clapped immediately. Ryan Holt let out a whistle. "Man, that's why nobody beats Ethan." Ethan gave a modest shrug that wasn't modest at all. "Consistency," he said confidently. "Most people panic under pressure." Just then, the front door of the range opened quietly. Nobody noticed her at first. Claire Bennett stepped inside, carrying a small canvas range bag faded from years of use. She wore worn blue jeans, simple sneakers, and a gray hoodie zipped halfway up despite the warm indoor temperature. Her blonde-brown hair was tied loosely behind her neck, and her expression remained calm, unreadable, almost detached from the loud energy filling the room. She paused near the entrance, letting her eyes adjust beneath the bright overhead lights while distant shots continued cracking across the range. Ethan glanced over casually, then immediately lost interest. To him, she looked like every nervous beginner who wandered into the facility after watching online videos and deciding shooting might be a fun weekend hobby. "You here for the beginner session?" he asked loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Several students turned toward her. Claire looked at him politely. "I'm here for the advanced class." A few quiet chuckles spread through the room. Ethan tilted his head slightly, amused now. "Advanced class." He looked her up and down slowly before exchanging a grin with Ryan. "Lady, the beginner safety course is downstairs. Advanced shooters usually know the difference." More laughter followed. Claire didn't react. She simply adjusted the strap on her range bag and walked toward the registration counter with steady steps. That calmness irritated Ethan more than if she had argued back. Most people shrank when embarrassed publicly. She didn't. From across the room, Olivia Hayes watched Claire carefully. Olivia had joined the range only 2 months earlier, but something about the quiet woman immediately felt different. It wasn't confidence exactly. It was composure, the kind that didn't need attention. Claire signed her paperwork without hesitation while the instructor, Jake Mercer, approached holding a clipboard against his chest. Jake was a former competition shooter himself, broad and serious, respected by nearly everyone inside Iron Creek. He scanned Claire briefly before glancing at Ethan. "She signed up for the elite movement drill," Jake said carefully. Ethan laughed under his breath. This should be entertaining. But as Claire unzipped her old canvas bag and calmly checked her protective gear with practiced hands, Olivia noticed something the others didn't. Claire never once looked nervous. Not even for a second. The moment Claire Bennett stepped onto the training floor, Ethan Cole decided she did not belong there. And people like Ethan rarely realized their biggest mistake was assuming quiet meant weak. The electronic timer above lane 6 flashed bright red numbers across the dim industrial walls, while students loaded magazines beneath the steady hum of fluorescent lights. Jake Mercer gathered the class near the shooting booths, his deep voice cutting through the noise of distant gunfire from the public lanes. "Today is movement and pressure control," he announced. "You miss safety fundamentals, you sit out." "Understand." The class answered with scattered nods and murmured agreement. Claire stood near the back, silent, hands resting calmly at her sides while the others shifted with nervous energy. Ryan noticed her again and smirked openly. "Still time to switch to knitting class," he joked. A few students laughed automatically, eager to stay close to Ethan's side of the room. Ethan leaned against the shooting bench with relaxed confidence, spinning one of his empty magazines between his fingers. "Do not worry," he said loudly. "Some people just come here for Instagram pictures." More laughter echoed across the concrete walls. Claire simply lowered her eyes briefly and continued checking her hearing protection. No reaction. No anger. That bothered Ethan more than he expected. Jake began assigning equipment for the drill. Each shooter would move between 3 marked stations and hit steel targets placed at different distances from 15 to 40 yards. It was not easy for beginners. Timing mattered almost as much as accuracy. Ethan naturally received the custom competition pistol everyone admired. Ryan and the others grabbed upgraded rentals from the equipment wall. Then Jake turned toward Claire. Before he could speak, Ethan casually reached for a compact beginner handgun from the lower rack and tossed it onto the counter in front of her. "Probably safer for everyone this way," he said with a grin. The room chuckled again. Claire glanced at the smaller pistol resting on the black rubber mat. She picked it up carefully, checked the chamber in one smooth motion, then released the slide with quiet efficiency. The movement lasted less than 2 seconds, but Olivia noticed immediately. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Most beginners fumbled with the slide or looked down while handling the weapon. Claire did neither. She moved like someone repeating a habit older than thought itself. Ethan did not notice. He was too busy enjoying the attention around him. "Remember," he continued, pacing slowly in front of the group like a performer on stage, "shooting is about confidence. Hesitation gets people embarrassed real fast." His eyes drifted toward Claire intentionally. Ryan laughed harder than anyone. Jake gave Ethan a warning look, but said nothing. Iron Creek Tactical Range had always been filled with strong personalities, and Ethan brought in paying students through his reputation alone. As everyone stepped into position, the overhead ventilation system roared softly above them, carrying away the sharp scent of burnt powder lingering in the air. Claire adjusted her stance quietly at lane 6. No wasted movement. No visible nerves. Olivia watched her from 2 lanes over, curiosity growing stronger by the second. Then the first timer beeped. Shooters raised their pistols almost instantly. Steel plates rang loudly downrange as shots echoed through the building. Some students hit cleanly. Others missed completely. Ethan moved with practiced speed, transitioning between targets smoothly while students behind the safety line whispered in admiration. "That is professional level right there," Ryan muttered. But while everyone watched Ethan, Olivia kept glancing toward Claire. The quiet woman was moving slower than the others, almost deliberately slower. One careful shot at a time. No rushing. No panic. Her face remained perfectly calm beneath the bright, white lights. Then Olivia noticed something else. Claire was not watching the targets after firing. She was watching Ethan. By the time the second drill began, Ethan Cole was no longer trying to impress the class. He was trying to embarrass Claire Bennett badly enough that she would walk out on her own. The loud electronic buzzer echoed across Iron Creek Tactical Range as students reset fresh targets under the bright fluorescent lights. Steel plates clinked softly downrange while the ventilation fans pushed warm air through the long industrial lanes. Jake Mercer studied the latest scores on his clipboard with a thoughtful expression. Ethan sat comfortably at the top, exactly where everyone expected him to be. Ryan and the others clustered around him like spectators around a champion athlete. Claire stood near the back again, quiet and almost invisible despite being the center of every joke in the room. Her score had landed somewhere in the middle of the class. Not terrible, not impressive, average on purpose. Olivia was beginning to realize that. "Next drill," Jake announced, "controlled transition shooting. 3 targets. Different distances. Accuracy matters more than speed." Ethan rolled his shoulders confidently and smirked toward Claire. "You might want to sit this one out," he called across the room. "Things move a little faster now." A few students laughed immediately. Claire calmly loaded another magazine without looking up. The tiny metallic clicks from her pistol sounded oddly precise beneath the surrounding noise. Olivia noticed it again. No wasted movement. No hesitation. Even the way Claire inserted the magazine looked practiced in a way beginners never were. Ethan stepped onto the firing line first. The room naturally quieted for him. He thrived on that silence, on the attention hanging in the air before the timer beeped. Then the buzzer sounded sharply. Ethan moved smoothly between targets, firing with fast, controlled rhythm while steel plates rang one after another. Ding, ding, ding. The final target swung hard from the impact, and several students immediately applauded. Ryan shook his head in amazement. Nobody in this state shoots like Ethan. Ethan lowered his pistol slowly, soaking in every second of admiration. Then he turned toward Claire with that same amused smile. Your turn. Claire stepped forward quietly. The oversized gray hoodie made her look even smaller beneath the harsh white lighting. Ryan leaned toward another student and whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. This is going to be painful. Even Jake seemed uncertain now. Take your time, he told Claire carefully. Focus on safety first. Ethan smirked at the wording. Safety first. As if she were a nervous tourist holding a firearm for the first time. Claire nodded once and raised the pistol. The room watched closely, waiting for her to fail. The buzzer sounded. Claire fired slower than Ethan had. Much slower. Her first shot hit low. The second barely clipped the outer edge of the steel plate. Someone near the back snorted with laughter. Ethan folded his arms confidently. Told you, he muttered. Claire finished the drill with another average score and calmly lowered the pistol. No frustration. No embarrassment. That calmness unsettled Olivia more than any perfect performance could have. Most people humiliated publicly either became defensive or visibly nervous. Claire became quieter, sharper somehow. Ethan stepped closer, enjoying himself now. You know, he said loudly, there is no shame in admitting some hobbies are not for everyone. Ryan laughed harder than before. Maybe yoga would be safer. The room filled with scattered chuckles again. Claire looked at Ethan for the first time since arriving. Her expression remained polite, almost distant, but something in her eyes had changed. Not anger, not humiliation, recognition, like she had finally decided exactly who Ethan Cole was. Then her gaze shifted briefly toward the moving steel target hanging nearly 40 yards away at the far end of the range. Olivia followed her eyes and felt a strange chill crawl up her arms. Because for the first time all afternoon, Claire Bennett was no longer pretending to be average. The most dangerous person in the room is usually the one who does not feel the need to prove anything, and Ethan Cole was far too arrogant to understand that lesson before it was too late. The tension inside Iron Creek Tactical Range shifted almost imperceptibly after Claire Bennett finished the drill. Most of the students still saw her as harmless, but Olivia Hayes could feel something changing beneath the surface. It was in the silence around Claire now. The stillness, like a storm holding itself together. Ethan, meanwhile, mistook that silence for defeat. He walked confidently across the concrete floor, applause and admiration following him naturally as brass shells crunched beneath heavy boots. You know what your problem is? He asked Claire loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. You are overthinking everything. Shooting is instinct. Confidence. You either have it or you do not. Claire calmly removed her hearing protection for a moment, revealing soft strands of hair falling near her face. Maybe, she answered quietly. Ethan smirked immediately, sensing surrender where there was none. Ryan leaned against the shooting booth divider, grinning openly now. She lasted longer than I expected. Jake Mercer checked the wall clock and exhaled slowly. The class was nearly over, but one final exercise remained. The advanced challenge drill. Most students skipped it entirely because of the difficulty level. At the far end of the range, nearly 40 yards away, a reinforced steel target system hung suspended from a moving track. The target slid side to side unpredictably, while small overhead lights flashed in alternating patterns designed to distract shooters under pressure. Hitting center consistently was considered extremely difficult even among experienced competitors. Jake looked toward the group carefully. Last challenge of the day, he announced. One shot only. Moving target. Closest shot to center wins. Several students immediately exchanged nervous looks. Ryan shook his head. No thanks. I already know Ethan is taking this. Ethan smiled confidently and rolled his shoulders back. Might as well give them a lesson before we leave. The room chuckled again. Olivia glanced toward Claire instinctively. Claire stood near lane 6, calm as ever, quietly placing her pistol onto the counter while the others talked over each other. Then Ethan looked directly at her. Actually, he said slowly, amusement spreading across his face. This could be fun. Jake narrowed his eyes slightly. Ethan ignored him. Claire, he continued, why do not you take a shot too? The room became quieter immediately. Everyone understood what this was now. Not a challenge. A public humiliation. Ethan wanted the class to watch her fail one last time. Ryan grinned eagerly. Yeah, come on. One heroic final shot. Olivia shifted uncomfortably. Even she could tell Ethan was pushing too far now. Claire looked toward the moving target in the distance. The metal plate glided silently across the far track beneath bright overhead lights. Left. Pause. Right. Pause. Jake folded his arms carefully. You do not have to do this, he told her. Ethan laughed softly. Why not? She signed up for advanced training. Claire stood motionless for several seconds. Then, without a word, she reached for her hearing protection again and placed it calmly over her ears. Ryan smirked wider. Ethan crossed his arms confidently beside the firing line, already enjoying the embarrassment he expected to witness. But Olivia could not stop staring at Claire's hands. They were completely steady. Not just steady from confidence. Steady from familiarity. The kind built through repetition, measured not in weeks or months, but years. The room slowly quieted as Claire stepped toward the firing position. Even the distant conversations from the public lanes seemed to fade beneath the low mechanical hum of the moving target system. Ethan still wore that same smug expression. He thought he was about to watch a beginner embarrass herself in front of everyone. He had no idea the hierarchy inside Iron Creek Tactical Range was about to change forever with a single shot. Silence has a strange way of warning people before their pride collapses. But inside Iron Creek Tactical Range, nobody understood that warning except Olivia Hayes. The moving steel target glided slowly across the far track beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, while every eye in the room settled on Claire Bennett. The air itself felt tense now, heavy with anticipation and amusement. Most of the students were waiting for the same thing. A miss. An awkward moment. One final reminder that the quiet woman in the gray hoodie never belonged in the advanced class to begin with. Ethan Cole leaned casually beside the shooting booth divider with complete confidence written across his face. He had already fired his shot minutes earlier, striking near center with impressive accuracy. Not perfect, but close enough that nobody else even wanted to attempt beating it. Ryan had practically declared Ethan the winner before the challenge was halfway finished. Do not overthink it, Ethan called toward Claire with a grin. Just point and pray. A few students laughed quietly again. Claire did not respond. She stepped fully into position beneath lane 6, the bright overhead lights reflecting faintly against the polished concrete floor around her feet. Her gray hoodie sleeves rested just above her wrists as she calmly adjusted her stance. Left foot slightly forward. Shoulders relaxed. Breathing steady. Olivia noticed Jake Mercer watching more carefully now too. Something about Claire's posture had changed completely. She no longer looked like someone trying to survive embarrassment. She looked comfortable. Familiar. The moving target slid right across the far end of the range, paused briefly, then reversed direction again with mechanical precision. Claire followed it calmly with her eyes, but did not raise her pistol yet. Ethan smirked. Any day now. Ryan chuckled loudly beside him. Maybe she is calculating wind direction indoors. More laughter echoed softly across the room. Claire ignored all of it. She slowly lifted the compact beginner pistol Ethan had mocked her with earlier. The small firearm suddenly looked different in her hand somehow. Not because of the weapon itself, but because of how naturally she controlled it. Her grip settled perfectly. No shaking. No stiffness. No uncertainty. Olivia felt her heartbeat quicken unexpectedly. She had watched hundreds of shooters at Iron Creek over the years. Beginners always revealed nerves in small ways. Tight shoulders. Rapid blinking. Jerky movements. Claire had none of those things. The room gradually became quieter without anyone realizing it. Even Ryan stopped talking. The target moved again. Claire inhaled slowly, then exhaled once. The sound of the ventilation fans hummed overhead while steel tracks clicked softly in the distance. Ethan folded his arms tighter, still confident, still amused, still completely unaware that he was seconds away from becoming the lesson instead of the teacher. Claire's eyes narrowed slightly as the target crossed center range. Time itself seemed to slow inside the room. Then came the sound. One single shot cracked through the range. Sharp. Clean. Final. The moving steel target jerked violently before the center plate exploded backward with a loud metallic snap. Sparks flashed briefly beneath the fluorescent lights as the target system froze completely. For one long second, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The room went silent. Absolute silence. The spent shell casing spun across the concrete floor near Claire's feet with a faint metallic ring before finally settling still. Ethan's smirk disappeared instantly. Ryan stared at the frozen target with his mouth half open, unable to process what he had just witnessed. Olivia slowly lowered her own hearing protection, her eyes fixed entirely on Claire. Jake Mercer stepped forward automatically, disbelief spreading across his face as he looked through the scope monitor mounted beside the lane. Then Jake froze too, because the shot was not simply near center. It was dead center. Perfect accuracy on a moving target at 40 yards using the smallest pistol in the building. Claire calmly lowered the weapon and rested it gently on the counter. No celebration. No smile. No pride. Just silence. And for the first time all afternoon, Ethan Cole looked genuinely nervous. The silence after Claire Bennett's shot felt heavier than the gunfire itself, because everyone inside Iron Creek Tactical Range understood they had just witnessed something impossible. The frozen steel target still swayed faintly beneath the fluorescent lights while the sharp metallic echo lingered through the long concrete lanes. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody moved. Ethan Cole stared toward the monitor screen beside Lane 6, as though his mind refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. Dead center. Perfect impact. On a moving target. Using the smallest pistol in the building. Ryan blinked repeatedly, his mouth opening slightly before closing again without words. Even the students who barely knew anything about competitive shooting could feel the atmosphere changing around them. Confidence had vanished from the room, and something else had replaced it. Respect. Jake Mercer stepped toward the scoring monitor slowly, almost cautiously, as though getting closer might somehow change the result. It did not. The digital screen confirmed the shot placement with brutal clarity. Perfect center mass alignment. Near flawless timing. Jake looked back toward Claire with growing disbelief. That shot, he muttered quietly. That is not beginner level. Claire removed her hearing protection calmly and rested it beside the pistol. No, she answered softly. Ethan finally forced a laugh, but it sounded strained now. Weak. Lucky shot, he said quickly. Even amateurs get lucky once. Nobody responded. The room remained silent. Ethan noticed immediately. For the first time all afternoon, nobody was looking at him. Their eyes stayed fixed on Claire. Olivia crossed her arms slowly, unable to hide the faint smile forming on her face now. She had sensed it hours earlier. The quietness. The discipline. The complete absence of ego. Claire had never looked like someone trying to impress people. She looked like someone trying not to reveal too much. Ethan stepped forward again, pride pushing harder than logic. Fine, he said sharply. Run it again. Jake glanced toward him. Ethan. Run it again. Ethan repeated louder. If she is really that good, let everybody see it twice. Claire remained still beside Lane 6, her expression unreadable beneath the cold white lighting. Jake hesitated for several seconds before finally nodding once. The target system reset with a loud mechanical click at the far end of the range. Students shifted quietly behind the safety line now, no longer smirking, no longer whispering jokes. Ryan swallowed hard and looked toward Ethan uncertainly. Something about the room felt different now. Smaller somehow. Claire picked up the compact pistol again with the same calm precision as before. Ethan watched her carefully this time, studying every movement. Then suddenly his expression changed. Slightly at first, then completely. His eyes narrowed toward her grip, her stance, the subtle positioning of her shoulders. Recognition flickered across his face like a light turning on inside his memory. He had seen those movements before. Not in person. In videos. Training footage. Professional demonstrations years ago. Claire exhaled slowly while the target began moving again beneath the harsh overhead lights. Left. Pause. Right. Ethan's confidence cracked visibly now. Wait, he said suddenly. Claire did not look at him. Jake frowned. What? Ethan stared harder at Claire, confusion spreading across his face. That stance, his voice lowered. No way. Olivia looked between them carefully. Claire fired again. One clean shot rang across the range. The steel plate snapped backward almost exactly beside the first impact point. Another perfect center hit. This time nobody even breathed. The room went completely still. Ethan looked physically frozen now, his face pale beneath the fluorescent lights as realization settled over him piece by piece. Jake slowly turned toward Claire again. Bennett, he said quietly. Claire Bennett. Claire lowered the pistol gently onto the counter. It has been a long time, she answered. Jake's eyes widened instantly. Ryan looked confused. Olivia stared at Jake. Then Jake let out a stunned breath and whispered words that sent another wave of silence through the room. You trained federal tactical instructors. The moment Jake Mercer revealed who Claire Bennett really was, the balance of power inside Iron Creek Tactical Range shattered completely. Nobody spoke. The only sound left in the room was the soft mechanical hum of the frozen target system hanging 40 yards away beneath the fluorescent lights. Ryan stared at Claire as if he were looking at a completely different person now. The woman he had mocked for hours no longer seemed ordinary in any way. Even her silence felt different now. Heavier. Controlled. Ethan Cole slowly lowered his arms from across his chest, the confidence draining visibly from his face. Federal tactical instructor? Ryan repeated quietly. Jake nodded without taking his eyes off Claire. Not just an instructor, he said carefully. She trained some of the best precision response teams in the country. Olivia's eyes widened. She looked back toward Claire's relaxed posture beside Lane 6, and suddenly every strange detail from earlier made perfect sense. The calm breathing, the steady hands, the way she scanned the room without appearing to look at anyone directly. Claire had never been intimidated because nothing happening inside Iron Creek was new to her. Ethan swallowed hard. No, he muttered. That cannot be right. Jake turned toward him slowly. You remember the Bennett precision drills from the national conference videos? Ethan's expression froze instantly. Of course he remembered them. Every competitive shooter in the region remembered them. Years earlier, short clips of impossible moving target exercises had spread across professional training circles online. Shooters everywhere studied those demonstrations frame by frame, trying to copy the timing and control. Most failed. The instructor in those videos had become almost legendary because nobody ever saw her miss. Ethan looked back toward Claire again, his mind finally connecting what his pride had refused to see all afternoon. The stance, the breathing rhythm, the impossibly smooth trigger control. His face paled beneath the bright overhead lights. You are Claire Bennett, he whispered. Claire rested one hand lightly against the shooting counter and gave a small nod. I used to teach, she answered quietly. The room remained completely silent. Ryan looked down at the floor, visibly embarrassed now by every joke he had made earlier. Several students avoided eye contact entirely. The humiliation they intended for Claire had slowly turned inward until they themselves became the lesson. Ethan forced out a nervous laugh, but nobody joined him this time. Why did you not say anything? He asked. Claire looked toward the frozen steel target for a moment before answering. Because you already decided who I was before asking. The words landed harder than any insult could have. Ethan opened his mouth slightly, but found nothing to say. Across the range, Olivia watched Claire with quiet admiration growing stronger by the second. There was no arrogance in her voice. No need for revenge. She was not trying to embarrass Ethan now, even though she easily could have. That restraint somehow made the entire moment even more painful for him. Jake folded his arms slowly. You spent the whole afternoon mocking someone shooters across the country studied for years, he said to Ethan. The room went still again. Ethan looked around and realized nobody was standing with him anymore. Ryan avoided his eyes. The students who had laughed earlier now looked uncomfortable just being near him. Pride had carried Ethan through the day, but now it abandoned him completely under the cold fluorescent lights. Claire calmly packed her hearing protection into the old canvas bag she had carried in earlier. No dramatic speech. No celebration. Just quiet dignity. As she zipped the bag closed, Ethan stared toward the two perfect shots still visible on the scoring monitor beside Lane 6. Dead center. Nearly touching each other. The best shot of his life suddenly looked ordinary beside hers. Claire lifted the worn range bag onto her shoulder and turned toward the exit. Then she paused briefly near Ethan. He could not even meet her eyes anymore. Claire spoke softly enough that only the closest students heard her. Skill speaks quietly, she said. Ego is usually the loudest thing in the room. Then she walked toward the front doors while the entire range remained silent behind her. Long after Claire Bennett walked away from Lane 6, nobody inside Iron Creek Tactical Range could return to acting the way they had before, because arrogance loses its power the moment real mastery enters the room. The heavy front door closed softly behind Claire as evening sunlight spilled briefly across the concrete floor before disappearing again. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, while the frozen steel target still hung motionless at the far end of the range like silent evidence of everything that had just happened. Ethan Cole remained standing beside the shooting booth, staring at the scoring monitor with unfocused eyes. The two perfect center hits remained displayed side by side beneath Claire's name, impossible to ignore no matter where he looked. Ryan finally cleared his throat awkwardly. "You seriously trained federal tactical teams?" Jake Mercer nodded once. "Years ago," he answered quietly, "before she disappeared from the competition world." Olivia leaned against the divider thoughtfully. "Disappeared?" Jake exhaled slowly. Claire Bennett was one of the most respected precision instructors in the country. Law enforcement agencies requested her specifically. Military trainers studied her methods. She could outshoot almost anyone without raising her voice once. Ryan looked stunned. Then why would she come here dressed like? He stopped himself mid-sentence, embarrassment washing over his face immediately. Jake looked directly at him. Like a normal person? The room fell quiet again. Ryan lowered his eyes toward the floor. Across the range, Ethan finally spoke, though his voice sounded nothing like the confident tone from earlier. "I watched her training footage years ago," he admitted quietly. "Everybody did." Jake folded his arms. "And somehow you still judged her by a gray hoodie." Ethan said nothing, because there was nothing left to defend. The entire afternoon replayed in his mind now with painful clarity. Every joke, every smirk, every moment he tried to make Claire feel small simply because she looked ordinary. He had spent hours trying to prove superiority to someone operating on a level he could barely comprehend. Olivia glanced toward the empty firing lane where Claire had stood earlier. "She never even tried to embarrass anyone," she said softly. Jake nodded. "People who are truly skilled usually do not need attention." Ethan stared again toward the motionless steel target in the distance. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar pressing against his pride. Shame. Real shame. Not because Claire outshot him, but because she had remained respectful while he became cruel. The fluorescent lights reflected faintly across the polished concrete floor as students quietly began packing their equipment. Nobody joked anymore. Nobody bragged about scores. The atmosphere inside Iron Creek had changed completely. Ryan slowly removed his hearing protection and shook his head. "I cannot believe she let us talk to her like that all day." Jake gave a faint, humorless smile. "She probably spent her whole life being underestimated." Ethan looked toward the front doors where Claire had disappeared minutes earlier. "Why did she not put me in my place sooner?" Jake answered without hesitation. "Because she did not need to." Those words settled heavily over the room. Ethan lowered himself slowly onto the bench near lane 6, still staring at the monitor screen glowing beside him. Two perfect shots. Nearly touching. Quiet precision without ego. Olivia picked up her range bag and paused before leaving. "The scary part," she said softly, "is that she was using the smallest pistol in the building." Ryan looked back toward the target and swallowed hard. Jake turned off the scoring monitor, but the silence remained. Even after the screen went dark, nobody forgot what they had seen. And somewhere beyond the parking lot outside, Claire Bennett drove away without celebration, without revenge, and without needing anyone to finally understand her worth. Because dignity never needed applause to exist. Meanwhile, inside Iron Creek Tactical Range, the loudest man in the room sat alone in silence, learning a lesson no competition trophy had ever taught him. 3 weeks after Claire Bennett walked out of Iron Creek Tactical Range, people were still talking about the two perfect shots that silenced the loudest shooter in the building. But the strangest part was not her accuracy. It was the fact that she never once tried to humiliate anyone back. The story spread quietly at first. A few students told friends. Someone mentioned it during a regional shooting competition. Then one of the younger members uploaded a blurry photo of the frozen target monitor online beside the words, "You never know who is standing next to you." Within days, shooters across the state recognized the name Claire Bennett immediately. Iron Creek Tactical Range suddenly felt different after that afternoon. The jokes became quieter. The bragging became softer. Students who once walked through the doors desperate to impress people now spent more time listening instead. Even Jake Mercer noticed the atmosphere changing. Respect had replaced noise. Humility had replaced ego. Ethan Cole noticed it too. At first, he avoided talking about what happened. Whenever someone brought up Claire's name, His expression tightened slightly before he changed the subject. But pride becomes exhausting once reality breaks through it. One evening after closing hours, Ethan stood alone near Lane 6 staring at the steel target system hanging under the dimmed fluorescent lights. The range was quiet now except for the low hum of the ventilation fans overhead. He replayed the afternoon in his head again and again. Claire's calm expression, her steady breathing, the complete absence of anger in her eyes, even while he mocked her publicly for hours. That part haunted him most. She had every reason to embarrass him. Instead, she simply showed the truth and walked away. Ethan finally understood something that competition trophies never taught him. Real confidence does not need an audience. The following Saturday, Iron Creek hosted another advanced training session. Students gathered beneath the bright lights while conversations echoed softly across the concrete floor. Ryan Holt loaded magazines at the equipment bench when the front door opened unexpectedly. The room gradually quieted. Claire Bennett stepped inside carrying the same faded canvas range bag over one shoulder. The gray hoodie, the calm expression, the same quiet presence that once made everyone underestimate her completely. But this time nobody laughed. Nobody smirked. Several students straightened instinctively the moment they saw her. Olivia smiled immediately from across the room. Jake Mercer walked forward with genuine respect in his eyes. "Good to see you back," he said warmly. Claire nodded politely. Then something unexpected happened. Ethan Cole crossed the range slowly toward her. The room became silent again, but not from tension this time. People simply wanted to hear what he would say. Ethan stopped a few feet away from Claire, no arrogance left in his posture now. He looked uncomfortable, which for him was rare. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. Nobody moved. Ethan took a slow breath before continuing. "I judged you before I knew anything about you, and I acted like being loud made me important." Claire studied him silently for a moment. The fluorescent lights reflected faintly against the polished concrete between them while the entire range waited. Finally, Claire gave a small nod. "The important thing," she answered softly, "is whether you learned something from it." Ethan lowered his eyes briefly, then nodded once. "I did." The tension in the room faded almost instantly. Ryan looked relieved. Olivia smiled. Faintly. Jake folded his arms with quiet satisfaction. Claire placed her range bag onto the counter near Lane 6 again, calm as always. Nothing about her appearance demanded attention, yet every person in the room respected her completely now. Not because she humiliated someone, not because she proved she was superior, but because she never needed cruelty to demonstrate strength. And as the quiet sounds of magazines loading and steel targets resetting filled Iron Creek tactical range once again, everyone there remembered a lesson far more valuable than accuracy. The world often notices arrogance first because it is loud, but true mastery usually enters the room in silence.